We have already looked at regular and correlated subqueries in this particular chapter, but not in a whole heck of a lot of detail. I'll just try to go into a little bit more explanation and add some tricks and tips where I can. In this case, we have what's called a regular subquery. It means there's no relationship between the calling query and the subquery. So the subquery finds all the data, passes all the data back to the calling query, and the calling query executes based on the content of whatever was passed back to it from the subquery. You can obviously use a query in the subquery, and the subquery doesn't have to be a subquery at all. It can actually be a list of elements. This is not technically a regular subquery, but this is another way to use in a set of values, which can be 0, 1 or more. The same applies with a subquery. And I have actually made quite an interesting point just there. This is where we go into a tip and or trick. So I've quickly gone into SQL Developer. What I said was that a subquery using an in clause, you can have 0, 1 or many as the result. So one way to prove it is, let's go and look in Dual. Dual comes up with a dummy column with a value x, so it has something in it. It's not null. Let's go and find everything from Dual where dummy is null. Guess what? It finds null or nothing. In this case, I'm going to say select everything from Dual where dummy, which is actually equal to x, is in select star from dummy's null, nothing. So what we're actually saying there is select star from Dual where dummy in, well, we could do it as a set. We should do it as a set. Dummy is null. It's not. That should give me a null result. Obviously, this will also give me a null result. Proves the point. So now let's go on to correlated subqueries. There is a distinct relationship between the calling table and a connection, in this case using a where clause in the subquery. You can also use the join clause. We'll demonstrate that in a minute. So the indexes in the category ID can actually perform exact index hits. What that means is that you actually, if you have really large tables, using the where clause to connect the two categories can actually do a much faster search, a much faster match. Within, as with exists, what happens when you hit that value, as in the index, it finds the value and it stops the search, doesn't find everything in the subquery, because there's a where clause. It's logical. Is correlated better? It depends. Depends what you're trying to do. If you're trying to aim at elegance in programming, the correlation is always better, but sometimes, for the sake of performance, it's sometimes better to read all the data, because sometimes Oracle will decide that it's faster to read an entire table that's really small than it is to read an index and find a single piece in a table. It's just a matter of the circumstances, the application, what you're trying to do at the time, and the database and the data in it. A lot of factors. But that's performance, and that's in another course somewhere down the road. So now let's get back to our examples. And here we have what is not actually a regular subquery. It's actually a query, but demonstrating the values or the possible values that could be pulled by a subquery. It's showing you that the subquery produces this first, and then it passes the result back into the calling query. And here we have a correlation using in, which, as opposed to just running all the data inside the query, passing it back to the calling query, it actually passes a value down from the calling query, which determines how the subquery executes, and then the reduced result data set will be sent back to the calling query if it is a reduced resulting data set. And here you use exists in the same capacity. As we said, exists is somewhat deprecated by in. And obviously we can have not as well to find the opposite, which happens to be everything else. And here we can do the same thing. Hit return. What I will do is actually copy these to make sure we have all the copies here. And this exists one. Here you have all the examples, so we don't lose anything. It's great for people who are learning a topic to have lots of examples. I find that I'm quite often referring back to examples rather than the technical instructional side of a new topic. If I look at the example, I just copy the example, I'm done. It's quicker.